She actually laughed when Judge Caprio read the charges. $2,300 in unpaid parking tickets, 47 violations, all in handicap zones. Madison Sterling, 24 years old, daughter of State Senator Richard Sterling, stood in Providence Municipal Court like she owned it. Her arrogance was about to expose a network of privilege abuse that reached into the highest levels of state government. But what Judge Caprio found in her records would make even her powerful father unable to save her. But Judge Caprio was about to discover that those 47 tickets were just the beginning. Because Madison wasn't just parking illegally, she was part of a system where political families had been getting tickets dismissed for years. And those 47 handicapped spots? They belonged to disabled veterans, cancer patients, and elderly citizens who had to park blocks away while Madison waltzed into restaurants and boutiques. Would Judge Caprio bow to political pressure? Or would Madison's entitled smirk finally disappear when she realized her last name meant nothing in his courtroom? What happens when a judge famous for compassion meets someone who's never heard the word no? If you've ever circled a parking lot for 20 minutes while someone illegally parks in a handicapped spot, if you've ever watched privilege walk free while regular people pay the price, subscribe to Judgment Story, because sometimes justice means treating a senator's daughter exactly like everyone else. This one gets uncomfortable, but it needed to happen. Tuesday, 2:15 p.m. Providence Municipal Court, Rhode Island. Case number T, C20248847. The People versus Madison Elizabeth Sterling. 47 counts of handicapped parking violations. Madison walked in wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than the total fines. Gucci sunglasses pushed up on her head. She checked her phone twice before the bailiff even finished calling her name. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't concerned. She was annoyed that this was taking time out of her day. Judge Caprio looked up from the file and spoke calmly. Miss Sterling, you understand you're here for 47 parking violations in handicap-designated spaces over 14 months? Madison sighed and shifted her weight. Look, Judge, can we just... I'm happy to pay whatever. My assistant usually handles this stuff. I didn't even know these were unpaid. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. Your assistant? These tickets span 14 months. You received 47 citations and never once noticed? Madison waved her hand dismissively. I get a lot of mail. Things slip through the cracks. The judge flipped through the papers in front of him. 47 violations. All handicap zones. Hospitals. Medical centers. Senior living facilities. VA parking lots. Miss Sterling, these aren't parking meters. These are legally protected spaces. Madison straightened up, suddenly more confident. I have a handicapped placard. It's my grandmother's. She lets me use it when I need to run quick errands. Judge Caprio stopped flipping pages. Miss Sterling, it's illegal to use someone else's placard. That's fraudulent use of handicapped parking privileges. But that's not even what concerns me most here. He looked down at a notation on the file. I see a note here from the DMV. Multiple complaints filed against your vehicle over the past year. Bailiff, pull all complaints and citation records associated with vehicle registration Delta Romeo 742 Kilo. A woman in the second row whispered to her husband, That's the black Mercedes. I've seen it at Street Joseph's, always in the handicap spot closest to the door. The bailiff walked to the back of the courtroom and picked up the phone. Judge Caprio began reading the citations aloud, one by one. February 12th, Rhode Island Hospital. Handicap space, a $1. $50 fine. February 19th, Providence VA Medical Center. Handicap space. Veteran parking only. $100 fine. March 3rd, Hope Hospice Center. Handicapped loading zone. $75 fine. He paused and looked up at Madison. That's 3 violations in 3 weeks. All at medical facilities. All using the same fraudulent placard. While cancer patients were parking 2 blocks away and walking in the rain, you were 15 feet from the door. Madison's jaw tightened. That's not fair. You're making it sound worse than it is. Judge Caprio closed the folder. I'm told the VA has security footage. Let's see it. The bailiff connected a laptop to the courtroom monitor. The screen flickered to life. Black and white footage showed a parking lot. A black Mercedes pulled into a handicapped space near the entrance. The driver's side door opened. Madison Sterling stepped out, tossed a placard onto the dashboard, and then sprinted. Not limped, not walked slowly, sprinted across the parking lot in heels toward the building entrance. Judge Caprio let the footage play in silence for a full 10 seconds. Then he spoke. "Miss Sterling, people who legitimately need these spaces can't sprint anywhere." Madison's voice cracked slightly. "I was late for a lunch meeting. My grandmother said I could use it." Judge Caprio picked up the phone on his desk. "I'd like to speak with the administrator at the Providence VA Medical Center, please. Put them on speaker." A moment later, a man's voice came through. "This is David Ortega, VA Administrator." "Mr. Ortega, this is Judge Caprio. I have a case here involving vehicle Delta Romeo 742 Kilo. Do you have any records of complaints?" "Yes, Your Honor. We've received 14 written complaints about that specific vehicle over 6 months. Veterans reported having to use wheelchairs to travel from distant spots while that Mercedes sat in veteran-designated parking. We forwarded everything to Providence PD and the DMV. Thank you, Mr. Ortega." Before the administrator could hang up, a man in the gallery stood. "Your Honor, if I may. That's the car. I'm a Purple Heart recipient. I watched her park there 4 times while I was receiving treatment. I reported it every time. Nothing ever happened." Judge Caprio nodded. "Thank you, sir. Please sit. I'll address this." The bailiff returned with a thick folder. "Your Honor, DMV records show 73 complaints filed against this vehicle registration over 18 months. Judge Caprio opened the folder and began reading aloud. 47 citations issued, 26 citations dismissed after intervention from the Senator's office. Total fines waived $3,450. He looked up. "That's roughly 2 citations per week, all at hospitals, medical centers, and veteran facilities, and more than half were dismissed." The bailiff placed another document on the bench. "Your Honor, phone records show calls from Senator Sterling's office to the DMV and Providence Police Department Traffic Division within 24 hours of each citation." Judge Caprio read the notation aloud. "Per Senator Sterling's office, citation under review." That phrase appears 26 times in these records. For the first time, Madison stopped looking at her phone. Her face went pale. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Miss Sterling, I'm going to ask you some very simple questions. I need yes or no answers. Did you use a handicap placard that wasn't issued to you?" Silence. "Yes or no, Miss Sterling?" More silence. "That's not a no." Madison looked down at her hands. My grandmother said." Judge Caprio interrupted. "That's not what I asked. Did you park in handicapped spaces using a placard that was not issued to you?" "Yes." "And did you know that your father's office was making your tickets disappear?" Madison hesitated. I didn't ask them to." "That's also not what I asked." "Yes. I knew." Judge Caprio spoke slowly, deliberately. "You parked in spaces reserved for disabled veterans while your father's office made your tickets disappear. That's not an oops. That's a pattern. You saw people who sacrificed for this country, people fighting cancer, people in wheelchairs, and you decided your lunch reservation mattered more." 8 seconds of silence. 10, 12, 14 seconds of complete silence. Madison stared at her hands. The gallery was frozen. Judge Caprio didn't move, didn't shuffle papers, just watched her. Finally, he spoke. "Accountability gets quiet, so the weight of what you've done can finally be felt." Another 5 seconds passed. "Here's my finding. The evidence is overwhelming. You systematically abused handicapped parking privileges using fraudulent credentials. Security footage, witness testimony, phone records from your father's office, and DMV complaint logs all confirm a deliberate pattern. Real veterans, real patients, real people with real disabilities were harmed by your entitlement. All 47 citations are upheld. That's $2,300 in fines. Additionally, fraudulent use of a handicapped placard carries a $500 fine and a 90-day license suspension. I'm forwarding this case to the Attorney General for investigation into public corruption, specifically the 26 dismissed citations. Madison's eyes widened. You will personally write apology letters to every complainant on record, not your assistant. You. 200 hours of community service at the Providence VA Medical Center. You'll be assisting disabled veterans with transportation and wheelchair services. You'll feel what it's like to help someone who actually needs that parking space you took. Judge Caprio looked directly at the court reporter. I'm placing the following reforms on the record. 1. All parking citation dismissals involving public officials or their families must be publicly logged and justified in writing. 2. The DMV will flag any vehicle with more than 5 handicapped parking violations for automatic review, regardless of political connections. 3. The Traffic Division must report any external pressure to dismiss citations to an independent oversight board. 4. A public hotline for reporting handicapped parking abuse, with mandatory investigation within 48 hours. 5. Every Rhode Island high school will receive education on disability rights and the consequences of placard fraud. At that moment, Senator Sterling appeared in the courtroom doorway. Your Honor, if we could discuss this in chambers. Judge Caprio didn't look up. Senator, your daughter is an adult facing adult consequences. This will be handled on the record, in public view. Senator Sterling stepped forward. I think you're being unreasonable. She made a mistake. Madison's voice cut through the room. Dad, don't. Just don't. Judge Caprio finally looked at the senator. Senator, I suggest you take a seat or leave the courtroom. Your choice. Senator Sterling stood there for 3 long seconds, then turned and walked out. Day 1 of Madison's community service. She arrived at the Providence VA Medical Center for orientation. The supervisor handed her a schedule and a name tag. You'll be helping veterans who can't walk unassisted. Some of them parked where you used to park illegally while you were shopping. Day 4. Madison submitted her first apology letter. The VA administrator read it and handed it back. This reads like your lawyer wrote it. Try again, in your own words. Day 9. Madison assisted 72-year-old Marine veteran Robert Chen from the parking lot to his dialysis appointment. He moved slowly with a walker. Halfway to the entrance, he spoke. I reported your car 4 times, got ignored every time. Figured that's just how it works when you're nobody. Madison didn't respond. She just kept walking beside him. Day 15. Second apology letter attempt. Still too polished. The supervisor shook his head. I don't want to hear about poor judgment. I want to know what you were thinking when you sprinted past a man in a wheelchair. Day 23. Madison spent 6 hours helping load and unload wheelchair users from transport vans. One woman asked, "Aren't you Senator Sterling's daughter?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Maybe you'll remember this." Day 45. Third apology letter. Handwritten, raw, honest. It began, I saw you struggling, and I didn't care. I told myself I was in a hurry, but the truth is, I just didn't think you mattered as much as I did. I was wrong. I'm sorry. This time, the supervisor approved it. Day 67. Madison completed an Introduction to Disability Rights course. The final essay question asked, what is privilege? Her answer, privilege is being able to not notice when you're taking something from someone who can't fight back. The supervisor's log told the story. Week 3, resistant. Week 6, compliant, but distant. Week 9, asked to stay, extra hours. Week 11, requested to continue volunteering after hours complete. Robert Chen, the Marine veteran, noticed the change. She asked if she could push my wheelchair instead of the orderly. Said she wanted to feel what it's like to navigate the parking lot from my perspective. We went out there together. Took us 12 minutes to get from the far end of the lot to the building. I told her that's what I did 4 times a week, while her car sat 15 feet from the door. Within 60 days of Judge Caprio's ruling, all 5 reforms were implemented statewide. Policy 1. A public database launched showing all citation dismissals involving public officials. 8 additional cases were flagged in the first month. Policy 2. The DMV's automated flagging system caught 23 repeat offenders in the first quarter. Policy 3. 3 instances of external pressure to dismiss citations were reported. 2 officials were reprimanded. Policy 4. The handicapped parking abuse hotline received 340 calls in 90 days. 67 cases were investigated. Policy 5. Disability rights curriculum was delivered to 94 Rhode Island schools, reaching 31,000 students. Boston, Hartford, and New Haven reviewed their citation dismissal policies after Rhode Island's reforms. The National Disability Rights Network cited the Sterling case in testimony before Congress on parking enforcement accountability. 3 law schools added the case to their administrative law curricula as an example of judicial courage. Robert Chen kept the first ticket he received for parking far from the entrance, the one he got because Madison's Mercedes was in his spot. Now I keep it next to the letter she wrote me. One reminds me how the system failed. The other reminds me it can be fixed. The VA administrator reported results. We've seen a 70% reduction in complaints about handicapped parking abuse since the hotline launched. People finally believe someone will listen. Judge Caprio keeps a still frame from the security footage in his chambers. Madison sprinting across the parking lot in heels, placard visible in her windshield. He mounted it on a bulletin board next to a photo of Robert Chen in his wheelchair. These 2 images side by side, that's the whole case right there. In a later interview, Judge Caprio explained his reasoning. Madison looked at that handicapped space and saw convenience. Robert Chen looked at the same space and saw dignity. Those are 2 very different things. One is a preference. The other is a right. This case wasn't really about parking. It was about power. When your last name can make 26 tickets disappear, you start to believe rules don't apply to you. But titles expire. Habits remain. And accountability? That never goes out of style. Some people asked why I was so hard on her. But I wasn't hard on Madison Sterling. I held her to the same standard I hold everyone. The hard part was what her father's office had been doing for 18 months, making her believe she was above the law. Real compassion isn't letting someone avoid consequences. It's helping them become the person they're supposed to be. The Sterling case became shorthand in Rhode Island politics. Don't pull a Sterling means abusing privilege. Disability rights advocates reference it in training sessions. Remember, every accessible space represents someone's independence. Ethics courses at Providence College use it as a case study in systemic reform. Connecticut adopted similar public logging requirements for dismissed citations. Massachusetts implemented automated flagging for repeat handicapped parking offenders. Vermont created a disability rights curriculum based on Rhode Island's model. Robert Chen filed that first complaint knowing it would probably be ignored, because 13 before it had been, he could have given up, could have accepted that's just how things work. Instead, he kept reporting, kept documenting, kept fighting. Judge Caprio said it best. Robert didn't just expose one person's entitlement, he exposed a system that enabled it. That takes courage most of us will never need to find. That courtroom showed that famous last names don't exempt you from basic decency. Madison proved that privilege can be unlearned if someone finally makes you face what you've done. Judge Caprio demonstrated that real authority serves justice, not power. 3 principles emerged from that case. Rules exist to protect the vulnerable, not convenience the powerful. Compassion isn't letting someone off easy, it's helping them grow. Justice means treating a senator's daughter exactly like you'd treat anyone else. What do you think? Should political families face stricter scrutiny when citations are dismissed? Should Madison's 200 hours of community service be the standard for placard fraud? Should Senator Sterling face consequences for the 26 dismissed tickets? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe to Judgment Story for more cases where judges choose principle over politics, where entitled defendants meet accountability, and where one veteran's persistence changes an entire system. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a judge can say is, "Your last name doesn't matter in my courtroom." This is a dramatized story created for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not legal advice, factual reporting, or an actual court proceeding. Madison Sterling returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom on day 91. Her community service was complete. Her apology letters had been sent and, in most cases, received responses. her license suspension was over. But Judge Caprio had scheduled this final hearing for a reason. Madison walked in differently than she had 3 months earlier. No designer suit this time. Simple jeans and a button-down shirt. No sunglasses, no phone in her hand. She walked to the defendant's table and stood quietly, waiting. Judge Caprio reviewed the documents in front of him. Miss Sterling, I have completion certificates from the VA Medical Center. 200 hours logged. Your supervisor provided detailed notes on your progress. I also have copies of the apology letters you sent, and 14 responses from the veterans and patients who received them. He looked up at her. I'm going to ask you to do something difficult now. In your own words, no script, no preparation. Tell me what you learned. Madison took a breath. I learned that I had no idea what accessibility actually means. I thought it just meant a ramp or a wider parking space. I didn't understand that for people like Mr. Chen, that parking space isn't a convenience. It's the difference between being able to go to a doctor's appointment or not. It's independence. It's dignity. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I learned that when you grow up with privilege, you don't even see it. I never thought about the fact that I could park wherever I wanted and just pay a fine if I got caught. I never thought about the fact that my dad's office could make those fines disappear. I just accepted it as normal. And I learned that normal for me meant impossible for someone else. Judge Caprio leaned forward. What about the veterans? What did you learn from them? Madison's voice caught slightly. I learned that Mr. Chen served 2 tours in Vietnam. He has shrapnel in his leg that causes him constant pain. He can't stand for more than 10 minutes without needing to sit down. And while he was going through dialysis 3 times a week, I was parking in his spot so I could grab lunch faster. I learned that Mrs. Patterson, one of the women who wrote a complaint, is an Army nurse who served in Desert Storm. She has MS now. She told me she used to run marathons. Now she needs a walker. And I made her life harder, because I couldn't be bothered to walk an extra 100 feet. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Your supervisor noted that you requested to continue volunteering after your 200 hours were complete. Why? Madison looked directly at the judge. Because 200 hours doesn't undo 18 months of entitlement. And because those veterans taught me more about responsibility and service in 3 months than I learned in 4 years of college. Mr. Chen told me that service means putting someone else's needs before your convenience. I want to keep learning that. Judge Caprio was quiet for a moment. He picked up one of the letters from his desk. This is from Robert Chen. Do you remember what you wrote to him? Yes, sir. He's given me permission to read part of his response. May I? Madison nodded. Judge Caprio read aloud. Mr. Chen writes, I didn't want to forgive her. I wanted her to be punished and forgotten. But after she pushed my wheelchair through that parking lot, after she sat with me during dialysis and asked about my service, after she showed up week after week, even when she didn't have to, I realized something. Punishment without change is just revenge. She changed. That matters. Judge Caprio set the letter down. Miss Sterling, when you first stood in this courtroom, you saw these citations as an inconvenience. You saw the fines as something your father's office could handle. You saw the people you harmed as invisible. Do you still see it that way? No, sir. I see it as the most shameful thing I've ever done, and I see those people as the reason I want to do better. Judge Caprio opened another folder. I'm reducing your remaining fine balance by $500 in recognition of your genuine transformation. But I'm not eliminating it entirely. You'll still owe $1,800. Do you understand why? Madison nodded. Because I still did it. The growth doesn't erase the harm. Exactly. Judge Caprio closed the folder. Your license suspension is complete as of today. You're legally allowed to drive again. But I'm going to ask you to make a choice. Will you apply for your own handicapped placard now that you're eligible to drive? Madison looked confused. I'm not disabled, Your Honor. I would never do that. Good answer. Judge Caprio smiled slightly. Case closed, Miss Sterling. Don't come back to my courtroom. Madison turned to leave, then stopped. Your Honor, may I say something? Go ahead. Thank you for not letting me get away with it. My father's office let me get away with things my whole life. You didn't. You made me face it. I hated you for it at first, but you were right. Judge Caprio nodded. That's what accountability feels like, Miss Sterling. It's uncomfortable. That's how you know it's working. 6 months after the hearing, the reforms Judge Caprio ordered were showing measurable results across Rhode Island. The public database of dismissed citations had become a model for transparency. Other states were watching. The automated flagging system at the DMV had identified 37 vehicles with patterns of repeat violations. 12 of those vehicles were registered to family members of public officials. Every single case was now under review. The system that had protected Madison Sterling for 18 months was being dismantled piece by piece. The handicapped parking abuse hotline received an average of 45 calls per month. The response rate was 93% within 48 hours. Compare that to the previous system, where complaints like Robert Chen's were filed and forgotten. People were finally being heard. The disability rights curriculum reached 112 schools by the end of the first year. Teachers reported that students were having conversations at home about accessibility, privilege, and responsibility. One high school senior wrote an essay about the Sterling case titled "The Parking Space I Never Thought About." It won a state writing competition. But perhaps the most significant impact was the quietest one. Complaints about handicapped parking violations at medical facilities dropped 68% in the first year after the reforms. Not because people stopped caring, because people stopped violating. Robert Chen was invited to speak at a disability rights conference in Boston. He brought the parking ticket and Madison's letter with him. He held them up in front of 200 advocates, municipal officials, and policymakers. This ticket represents a broken system. This letter represents what happens when one person is finally held accountable, but neither of these pieces of paper changed anything by themselves. What changed things was a judge who refused to look the other way. What changed things was a system that finally listened. What changed things was consequences that meant something. He paused and looked around the room. How many of you have filed complaints that went nowhere? How many of you have watched someone park illegally and thought, why bother reporting it? That's what happens when accountability is optional. When Judge Caprio made it mandatory, everything shifted. The conference audience gave him a standing ovation. 3 cities implemented similar reforms within 6 months. Madison Sterling continued volunteering at the Providence VA Medical Center every Saturday. She wasn't required to. She wasn't getting credit for it. She just showed up. The veterans knew who she was. Some of them forgave her. Some of them didn't. She showed up anyway. One Saturday morning, she was helping a veteran named Marcus Washington navigate from the parking lot to the physical therapy wing. He'd lost his left leg in Afghanistan. He used a prosthetic but still needed mobility assistance on longer walks. Halfway to the building, he stopped and looked at the handicapped parking spaces near the entrance. You used to park there, didn't you? Madison nodded. Yes, sir. I did. Marcus looked at the spaces for a long moment. My wife drops me off because I can't drive anymore, PTSD. But on days when she can't, I take the bus. Bus stop is 4 blocks away. Takes me 40 minutes to get from the bus stop to the front door. You know what I thought about every time I made that walk and saw cars in those spots that didn't belong? What? I thought, I gave my leg for people who don't even see me. Marcus turned and looked at her. But you see me now, don't you? Yes, sir, I do. Good. Keep seeing. That's the whole point. They continued walking. Madison pushed the wheelchair. Marcus was quiet until they reached the doors. You know what else I think about? What's that, sir? I think about how easy it would be to stay angry, to look at you and just see the person who took something from me. But anger doesn't get me to physical therapy. Anger doesn't rebuild muscle. You know what does. Madison shook her head. People who show up, you keep showing up, that counts for something. Judge Caprio gave another interview on the 1-year anniversary of the Sterling ruling. The reporter asked him if he had any regrets about how he handled the case. No regrets. But I'll tell you what I think about. I think about all the cases that happened before Madison Sterling, all the tickets that got dismissed, all the complaints that were ignored, all the Roberts Chens who filed reports that went nowhere. Those people deserved the same justice. They didn't get it. The reporter pressed. Do you think the system is fixed now? Judge Caprio shook his head. A system isn't fixed by one ruling. It's fixed by consistent accountability over time. We've made progress. We've created transparency. But the real test is what happens when I'm not sitting on the bench anymore. Will the next judge uphold these standards? Will the next police chief investigate complaints? Will the next DMV administrator flag violations? That's the test. The reporter asked one more question. What would you say to Madison Sterling if she were here right now? Judge Caprio thought for a moment. I'd say, you did the work. You faced what you did. You changed. Now, keep changing. Because this wasn't about punishing you. It was about making sure the next person who thinks their last name makes them special learns the lesson before they hurt someone. As the reforms spread beyond Rhode Island, something unexpected happened. Other cases began to surface. In Connecticut, a city council member's son had accumulated 32 parking violations in handicapped zones over 2 years, all dismissed. In Massachusetts, a state representative's daughter had been using her grandfather's handicapped placard for 5 years. No consequences. In New Hampshire, a police chief's nephew had 61 violations. Every single one waived. The Sterling case became the template for addressing all of them. Accountability, transparency, consequences, transformation. One detail from the Sterling case often gets overlooked, but Judge Caprio considered it the most important. When Madison submitted her third apology letter, the one that was finally accepted, she included something unexpected. She had researched every person who filed a complaint against her vehicle. She learned their names, their service records, their medical histories where publicly available, and in each letter, she referenced something specific about them. To Robert Chen, she wrote about his service in Vietnam and his dedication to showing up for dialysis 3 times a week despite the pain. To Patricia Patterson, she wrote about her nursing service in Desert Storm and her battle with MS. To James Rodriguez, she wrote about his Purple Heart and his volunteer work reading to children at the VA hospital. She saw them. Finally, after 18 months of invisibility, she saw them. That's what Judge Caprio had been waiting for. Not a polished legal apology, not a generic expression of regret, but evidence that she finally understood that the people she harmed were real, complex, valuable human beings whose lives mattered just as much as hers. When the supervisor at the VA Medical Center submitted his final evaluation of Madison's service, he included a note that Judge Caprio kept. It read, "She arrived, entitled. She left educated." That's the best outcome we could have hoped for. Subscribe to Judgment Story for more cases where accountability transforms lives, where judges see beyond the paperwork to the people, and where one parking ticket becomes a lesson in dignity, service, and what justice really means. Because sometimes the most important question isn't what someone did wrong, it's whether they're willing to make it right.